So while you guys are warming your clay up, I know we've got a few minutes before we start, but we're going to start anyway. If I can get this going, Kristine will be here in a moment. And this is just playing with while you're just working in your hands, get it as warm as you can. And we're going to dive in a sec. If I can get this going, we're just going to quickly go through a few slides that have to do with rough sketches. And you're going to see these in museums. We find these enchanting. Here's some ones by Canova. And you're going to see on the left and the right the clay sketch and the final piece. We're just going to have fun with a lot of these things. And let's see. I'm not sure that this is set up quite the way Kristine wanted it to, but you're also going to see, here are some Scott Gustafson, where he's using clay to inform his 2D work. So if you're a 2D artist, this is a great way to get a sense of lighting. He gets pretty complex with this. James Gurney, same thing. Brilliant artist, but he's using some fairly complex sketches, which he's making out of all kinds of things. The one that's coming, that one is, I think, foam core. This is just to inform his sculptures or his paintings of. This he's making out of foam core. This one, he's using this for doing his architectural work. It's still not going to cooperate. This one here is made out of plaster that's, or burlap that's soaked in plaster, and then the building itself is made out of a foam core. So you can make it out of all kinds of things. This next one, whoa, right there, the one on the left is his mock-up, and that silver Christmas bauble is to give him information about what the lighting's doing. And obviously he's changed it quite a bit, but the silver is only for his own personal reference for what he did in this, and so he can see where his lighting, you can see his skylights, his big arch window and stuff in the background. Again, these can be super quick. We're going to be working on super quick. And you can get a lot with minimalist strokes. There's some samples of some very loose ones, which is what we're going to be doing right now, as well as ones that are super tight. And this right here, although it's a sketch, we expect you all to be doing this by the end. You've got 45 minutes to get there. You can carry quite a bit of emotion and storytelling within a minimalist amount of work. Some of these snapshots we've done in museums, so I apologize for the crappy photos. But you do get a good sense of where, sort of before and after. And also whether you're going to be used a single figure, multi-figures. These are done in terracotta. This one here, the same as here, coming up is a multi-figure one with 2 figures, more figures. These are quite small. Same here, they're in this kind of scale. This one here is a little bit bigger. Again, terracotta, which is sort of the go-to for the historical ones. Terracotta is super smooth, super nice to work with, and really hand-friendly. And talking about materials, you're going to have, this is an example of just straight clay. This next one is clay with things that are mimicking wood, and then the next one coming up is looking at what it is when you're including wood. So these are proposals for clients. The next one this is wax. So that's also totally legit. Michelangelo was also using wax as well. So over time. And so these are some samples. I'm going to start diving into the clay. My favorite tools are these things right here. And so when I'm doing a sketch, I do these in the morning, and I just grab a cup of tea, and by the time the tea is cold, I start my sketch. Kristine, we missed you. I totally hacked your presentation, but there you go. You can start it all over again and make it. So I do these quickly, and we were wondering whether to hand you out tools, and then thought, let's just stick with your fingers to start with. And for the most part, that's what I'm doing. I'm just getting in touch with the kid inside of me. And I was also wondering whether we should do like little places for you to work, but a lot of times it's a lot of fun just to work it in your hands. You're sitting in the car, whatever you're doing, just moving it around, seeing what happens. And we dive in, and you'll see a lot of these that are up there on the screen, and they are, I have no idea what they're going to start at. And I'm just squidging the clay, taking a moment to, like a child, look at it and go, okay, what do we have going here? Well, okay.
Is it a ducky or a horsey?
Yep, and right now it's looking more like an elephant. So I love having a spin base. My favorite is this, which is it's a cake decorating thing that's from Amazon, and $28. I love it because it spins really easily, and Kristine hates it because it spins really easily.
Yeah, so a lot of what I'm interested in are stories that people tell, the words that we use. And so my sketches oftentimes are little demon characters that represent the voices in your head. As an artist, sometimes you have that imposter thing that you look at what you just did and that little voice says, yeah, it's okay, but you could have blah, 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 or whatever. And so I make the little things, and what I found when I started sketching these little voices is when they came out, they weren't quite so ugly and horrible. They were cute and funny, which gave me a completely different perspective on those little voices in my head. And I realized that they're there to try to continue to help me improve and to let me know which direction my voice should be going and to give feedback, helpful feedback. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. Did you show the sketches at the beginning?
I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Wow, you guys are so fast. Yeah. So you guys got to see James Gurney and Scott Gustafson, and oh my God, wow, where have I been? So the rest of the slideshow is actually just historical bozzetti and sketches that when we go to museums, we seek them out because they're just stunning and beautiful, whether they're super loose or whether they're quite highly developed. And you guys are all working with Monster Clay. I went and bought some of this DOS air dry clay. It's at Hobby Lobby and Michael's and probably Amazon. I haven't really worked with this before, but I thought I would try it today. And I brought a selection of very specific tools. So I took these from our hotel. I will return them. I took
Not a chance.
pencils and makeup that I had, and I took a pendant. Just so that you guys aren't like at necessarily any disadvantage in doing this. The only difference in working with this is I would treat it like water-based clay. So like if I was gonna stick an arm on, I would, do any of you know what score and slip means? Yes. Everybody? Does anybody not know what? Okay. So with water-based clay, it has a lot of great properties. It feels wonderful. But if you're going to join two pieces together and want it to stay when you dry and fire it, you need to use a highly specialized tool. I prefer a fork because it makes nice deep scratches. And you scratch the surface like this. And then you take some of your clay and you squish it up in some water, and it makes like a glue, we call it a slip. But then you just dab that in that joint on both sides, stick the two parts together, wiggle it a little bit, and there are ways to join it more securely for big sculpture, but for this scale, that would be plenty. And that usually will keep it from cracking when it's drying. So at the end of today, if any of you want to grab a little chunk of this just to feel what like a water-based clay feels like, you are welcome to do that. This will stay wet as long as you keep it covered, and you can spray it with like a spray bottle. Okay? So I think that's all I have to say before I open this bag, but we'll see.
What I found when I'm doing this, I'm doing it without any intention. I don't have any designs behind it. Started as an elephant. I'm not sure quite where it's going. It looks a little bit like a bear there for a little while. And as I'm doing this, I'm frequently taking it at this juncture if I'm liking what's happening with it, I'm running with it. If not, I'm trying again, squeezing a little bit, and maybe I come up with something and maybe I don't. You'll see some of these examples up here at our booth. There are 35 of them where, each time it's a little bit different. And sometimes it's something that I think, this is a real keeper. It's kind of fun. I like it. And other times it's just squished up and pushed back in there. And it's getting the pressure off of you that you don't do something that's total genius each time. And sometimes you do, and sometimes you look at it and you think, I'd like to run with this. I'd like to make this into a painting. I'd like to make this into a full-on sculpture. Or I like it's the seed for something. And other times it's just getting in touch. I think most of us, we put so much pressure on ourselves to do something that's absolute genius and a finished piece that is client ready. And this may not be that. This may be just having fun. As little ones, when we push things around, whether it's crayons or whatever, we're having a good time with it. And as we become professionals, there's a lot of pressure that it becomes really good. But often you do end up stumbling into really good regardless. The clay that you use is going to inform what you do, especially if you drop it on the floor. Sorry about that.
You left out that key step. Yeah, so I typically work with a very groggy, sandy sculpture clay because I do a lot of big sculptures. If you come by our booth, you'll see some of the mid-scale things. But the sandier and groggier, so grog is clay that's been fired in the ground up into little tiny bits. And so it's a lot more forgiving for large-scale stuff. Large-scale stuff likes to crack. And the sculpture clays have ingredients that help to negate that. And I use that kind of clay even on small sketches so that I can have arms sticking out. But if, like, say you wanted an arm sticking out or a tail or fabric swooshing around, you can make what's called an external armature. So if this thing is sticking out, like that, like it's a horse's tail, and it doesn't want to stay, let's say it keeps dropping like that, this clay seems to be pretty good. I would very quickly roll a little coil and just support it like that. And I would keep that little support in there throughout the drying, and if it was going to go in a kiln, then I would stick it in the kiln with that support so that sometimes when we fire clay, it gets hot enough that it starts to kind of want to wiggle around in the kiln, and that's really awful because then your arms don't have bones. So yeah, we keep those external braces on there. My initial sense of this is it's not quite like water-based clay. It's a little bit more like rubbery, maybe a little bit towards a sculpey kind of a feeling to it. I would like it to be a little bit more feeling like the water-based clay, like what Colin has. It kind of tears a little bit, like shears when I'm stretching it. Oh, it's okay.
Okay.
I'm
We got
gonna
clay.
mess with this weird stuff. But yeah, so it doesn't join back together as well as like a typical water-based clay. So if you go around and you get a new material, it's good to just take it out. You notice the first thing I did when I take it out is I smell it, right? Which is kind of strange.
And
But
you
it
got
makes
to
a
taste it?
difference. Yeah, when we work on, what's that?
You got to taste it?
Yeah, you should no, there are kids here, don't eat the clay. They'll be like, okay, When we work on monuments, we always heat the clay up and we smell it because there's a lot of it in the studio, and if it's really stinky and smelly and weird, we don't want to work with that because we have to smell it for several months. And so what it smells like is somewhat important, but this one doesn't have much smell at all that I can tell. And I would just kind of squish it around like what you guys are all doing.
So what you were doing right there in the front row, where you were going in a direction, it wasn't working, you squish it back up, that's brilliant. And this is what is ideal, where you're just taking it and you're just feeling it, you're taking it in a direction. If it doesn't work in that direction, move in another one. That's terrific. I think, go ahead.
Can anybody call out what they're seeing in their clay? A face? Okay, good.
You've got a dragon head, right?
Torso?
Horse?
Oh, a fish? We got a fish.
Yeah, perfect. Alien. Duck with a big bill? Seahorse. Sorry. Okay.
A
Cat and a wizard? Yep.
Cool.
I find with my clays, I'm often wetting them for you've got an Islander, tiki, yeah.
Easter Island.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
That's what every sculptor's like. Look at my work in progress, and then my friends will send me the Easter Island emoji because it's like a full body character with like a super simple face.
Exactly. So I would challenge you that whatever direction you're heading is great. It was the initial thing. But keep asking yourself, does it want to go somewhere else? Does it want to be something else? Does it need another something added onto it? If you're making a cat, does it need something for the cat to be standing on or under or hiding in or by? Or does it want to have some kind of a pedestal or a base? Or, you learn a lot by making multiple, and I know you've got just a teeny little bit of clay, but scale, I think Colin mentioned that to you. You might have your cat this big, and what happens if you put an elephant in there that's this big? How does that change the story? So maybe you have just a little walnut-sized shape of clay left. What can you make with that totally shifts the story for the viewer or for yourself and your experience of that thing that you started with?
And you'll see a couple of those in the sketches of mine up here that whenever they show up, where I've done exactly that. There's one with a bull, and then I put a tiny little guy, and suddenly the bull is a giant. And the one with a fish, and then you put a little tiny guy sitting on top of it, and then it becomes a whale. Not the ones we're looking at right now, but imagine.
They will come up eventually.
I find when I'm doing this with the water-based clay, I prefer the water-based just because it's quick and it squishes easily. I'm not worrying about any of the scoring and slipping that Kristine was mentioning. I'm just pushing it around. So at this point with this particular one, it started out with the elephant, it went in the bear direction, then it went sort of a hyena thing, and now it's a chubby guy sitting looking pretty sleepy. And I may end up running with that a little bit, seeing if I'm amused by it or not. The advantage to having it super wet, which is wetter than most clays you would work with, is that the speed with which I can move and make a stroke. The disadvantage is I can't make a limb extend very far before it collapses. So yeah, everything is going to be a little bit cow patty. Kristine, we're using the groggy clay with the extra, the sculpture aspect of the texture within it. It doesn't move as quickly, but she can do very fine little fingers. So being able to switch these back and forth, warming your clay up is going to help. Each clay is going to be different. You're going to find some clays you just detest, and other ones that are glorious. I think they all have advantages and disadvantages. If you're unfamiliar with working with water-based clay, all of you, without exception, live somewhere near-ish to a place that sells pottery supplies. A 25-pound bag of water-based clay is about $15. And most of the stores that you go to that sell those supplies will have a bunch of them in a stack, and you'll be able to open them up and feel the texture of each one and decide whether the color, the texture feels right to you, and then try it out. There's no investment. If it turns out that you like your finished piece, you can set it aside, let it dry slowly, hollow out the bottom of it so that it's not too thick, depending on the size of it. And once you've accrued a certain amount, if you think these are keepers, then end up, you can rent kiln space in, so all these people that are firing pots and such, you can rent a shelf. So you may spend $30 renting a shelf, and then you've got a place where you can fire all of these, and they will last longer than you will, for better or worse.
You can also, if you're doing something that has a pose where like the head is upside down or hidden somewhere, you can take the head off once you've got the proportion and scale set and work on the little details of the face and then stick it back on, just so that you can get a little bit more refinement. And I think you guys saw some of the ones where there was the initial clay sketch, which was quite loose and rough, and then there were another clay sketch where it was quite a bit more developed as that person went further along. And you can do that too, where you might do 20 of these little sketches and then pick some that you really like, and then you take it into a more developed clay, and then maybe you're using that as reference for some of your 2D stuff.
Something I didn't include in the slideshow, but for people who are working in 2D as well, I've done some very rudimentary sketches that are highly useful for my paintings. And one of them in particular that came to mind was I just took a washcloth and wrapped some tape around it and a couple pieces of cardboard, and it was a guy in a boat and could light it effectively, and I wouldn't have been able to pull that kind of lighting out of my imagination, but something as simple as that, which is very rudimentary, was highly useful. James Gurney, of course, we showed you those examples there. Even something as simple as this, guy sitting in a chair, taking this, putting it in different lighting scenarios, can really jumpstart the effectiveness of your sculpture. Oh, dropping more clay on the floor.
So I am finding with this particular clay, it does not adhere if you don't score it and use either a little bit of water in there, which is quite different from that water-based clay where you can actually just stick it together if it's wet enough. So this one would require a little bit more practice to figure out the working properties of, to have you decide that you're friends. Like right now, me and this clay, we're not friends. We don't like each other.
I had a question.
Please.
If it's possible, like, could you guys occasionally maybe hold up what you're doing because
Oh.
I can't really see it?
Because it's brilliant.
Thank you.
So, little chubby guy, this is based on Frank Cho, actually. It's a dead ringer. I'm not sure if I got the glasses quite right. But, you know, he's often posing in the nude, so I figured I'd just run with it.
So I'm making a little demon that's standing on his head. Right, and he's pretty much just a stick figure right now, but there's already, like, if I push his head here, it's gonna change it. If I push his head to the side, that's gonna give a different kind of feeling. He could be wrapping his arm around the legs. So I'm leaving it pretty open. With the water-based clay, you may find that things like ankles and wrists and things like that, you want to leave them thicker, and then as the clay starts to dry up a little bit, get a little firmer, you can go in and carve some off.
Is anybody flailing and thinking, oh my God, this is a disaster? Do you dare raise your hand if it is? Okay, you in the back. What's going on? How can we help?
I don't know.
That sounds like us.
Perfect. I'm on the way.
You should have had your Superman t-shirt.
Yeah. Just as far as some of the supplies that I'm using, for water-based, which is not what you have in your hands right now, I just have a sponge from Office Depot for, I guess, I don't know what they use them for, but, and I have it in a ramekin, and it just keeps my fingers a little bit damp, which helps me a little bit. Kristine is going to entertain you while I make a mess of somebody's work. That's actually, it's an oil-based clay, so it never dries, but it's more waxy. And there are there are different brands that will have different qualities to them. So Les Beaux Touches has one that is more oil than wax. Monster clays tend to be more wax than oil. This one is heatable and pourable, not a quality that I use myself.
So the clay that you all are using is Monster Clay, and it's Monster Clay Soft, and they make it in many hardnesses, and it was very generous. Yeah. It's quite waxy, and it was very generously donated to us by Monster Clay. Thank you, Monster Clay. Oh, did they? Oh, that's cool. I want one of those. No, you can like heat it up and melt it down, and you can heat it up, melt it down, use it again and again and again. And for clay sketches, that's oftentimes a good thing. Just make the sketch, and then take pictures of it if you like it, and then squish it up and make another one, and keep doing that. So the little bits of brilliance that are being talked about in this front row of overachievers is that you can, if you make a sketch that you particularly like that might inspire, a future artwork, you can either document it with photography and then squish it up and make another one and keep doing that. But you can actually also make a mold of that piece if it's really great, and then you can cast resin into it. You can actually melt monster clay and pour monster clay into it and then adapt it further. You can pour wax into it and then turn it into bronze. If it's really, really good. If there are any people out there that are flailing that are a little too shy to say that they're flailing, something that you can do is just either like sneak a glance at what your neighbor is doing and think, if I was creating a character, you're not gonna copy your neighbors, but you're gonna be inspired by it. And imagine if I was creating something that was interacting with their thing, what would it be doing? Or if you happen to be very inspired by your neighbor or very inspired by a particular artist or a museum, you can ask yourself, okay, so I saw this really brilliant piece by James Gurney. Yeah, and let's say I saw it in a museum, and I'm going to imagine what I would want to see if I walked around the corner. That was the next step from that. So you kind of start asking yourself, I'm really inspired by this. I don't want to copy it. I don't really want to mimic it. I can just ask myself, what would the next thing be? What would I want to see next? Because that's you. That's your inspiration that's coming out. Okay, so there's a question in the front. Do we use measuring tools when we're sculpting? So she's saying that in drawing you can use your pencil to measure. And what do we use in sculpting? So when we're doing things like this, because it's just a sketch, we don't use any measuring tools. But yes, we measure extensively. So we use calipers. Do you know what calipers are? So calipers look like a crab claw like this, right? And you open it and you can measure somebody's head and compare it, because all of the proportions that you've learned in your drawing, the rough checks, a human body is roughly 7.5 heads high, right? You can use that in your sculpting too. But yes, we use measuring tapes, we use calipers, we use rulers, we do length, we do circumference, we do distances. Do you all know what bony landmarks are? Yeah? Yeah, we use bony landmarks a lot, right? Because in sculpting, if I've got a pose and the arms are back here, I'm going to be tending, sorry, I guess people in the back can't see. So if I have a pose and my arms are like all twisted like that, I'm going to be inclined to want to make this arm longer, because in my mind it's saying, wow, how's it get all the way back there? So it's really important to know the distance of the bony landmarks and to understand that they're squash and stretch. So even though the ribs are hard and the ribs don't get longer, the cartilage does stretch. Right? And so we do use a lot of measuring when we're doing our working on finished pieces. And I usually do a lot of measuring at the start just to compare, but I use my eye a lot at this point. So a lot of times I'll just be working, and if something looks wrong, I will then go back to the measurements. So when we work with a particular model a lot, we have her stand in an anatomical position. Do you all know what that is? Okay.
Like Vitruvius Man.
Anatomical position. No muscle groups are crossed over the other, okay? Good position, okay? And if y'all want to learn about anatomy, guess who's here at the event?
Proco!
Proco! Go find Proco. He's really great. So we take picture. We used to just draw a rough crime scene outline and write our measurements on that. But then we got mixed up which model went to what. So now if we know we're gonna work with the model, we do a series all the way around with her standing in an anatomical position, no expression, no nothing. And we actually write measurements directly on, and we do lengths, we do circumferences, some measurements that are soft things, like if I was measuring from the belly button up to the sternal notch, that can change pretty dramatically, but I'll still do it just to have that as a reference for if I'm looking at something and I'm like, yeah, it should be in the ballpark of this. Because even though there are certain anatomical references that we all use, everybody's a little different, right? If I had you all stand up, we'd see a whole lot of different proportions happening in here, right? And so I use the measurements as ballpark. I think, Colin, you use measurements a bit more specifically, do you?
For refined pieces, yes. For sketching, I don't do any of this. So sketching, it's just keeping it loose. For the most part, when I'm doing this, I don't use any reference at all. I'm just pulling it out of my imagination. And possibly in the last 5 minutes, if I'm doing something that I am so unfamiliar with, I will look it up quickly just to see. For example, there was well, golly, I can't even think of what the animal was.
Capybara?
Yeah.
Platypus?
Hyena.
A hyena?
Hyena. And I was just finishing it up and I thought, I don't actually know if hyenas can sit. So and I Google it and they don't actually sit like dogs. So I do a quick adjustment because I was way off. And yeah, I don't have a whole lot of hyenas where we live, so I'm just not familiar with it. But I don't want to get too caught up in accuracy more than impression with a sketch. And I think I'd just fall down the rabbit hole if I'm looking at my capybara and deciding that, okay, we're going to make this thing accurate. Anybody feel, gentleman in the back who's just started again, rock on. That's a great way to do it. I've got this little chubby guy hanging out, decide, okay, and we're going to start again. And gentleman in the front here was mentioning, don't get too precious with it. And I think that's a good way to go, as well as the lady in the back, where unless it's something that you're really loving, you're really excited about, if you're bogging down with just sort of, oh, what do I do with this thing? Squish it, start again. Here we've got this, to me, it's either a horse and a rider struggling over a hill, or it's a woman dancing or being coquettish. Don't know which one I'm going to go with, but I can just decide, all right, maybe that
Remember
capybara
to
is
hold
going to
them
happen.
up when you're changing something, because the
sorry.
poor people in the back can't see
Yeah.
anything. Feel sorry.
Please jump in.
The pieces you guys have made that you like the most, have they come from an abstraction or pre-planning?
Both. Sometimes it is this, I don't do this, as I mentioned, with the intention that this is going to be something that turns into something. It's more, I want my hands to just enjoy the clay and not be too fussed about it. And so, but sometimes you stumble across something that you go, that's really kind of cool. I like it. It's, the doodle that turns into something that's in its own way brilliant. Sometimes this is all it's going to be. Other times it's going to turn back into that. We were talking with Andrew Kars, who has an approach where he does a sketch, and then whatever the time frame he is, maybe every day he does a sketch, and he keeps his best and throws away the others and keeps recycling it until at the end of a specific period he's got a lot of work that is inspiring to him, and then those are the basis. I'm not that, I just want my cup of tea. I'm not that interested in it.
So I can expand on that a little bit too. If we're talking about pieces that have sometimes we have a very clear concept. I oftentimes do, because there are what I would refer to as statement pieces, where I'm inscribing words and stories, because a lot of my work deals with the importance and the self-responsibility of the words that you say and the realities that it creates, not only for yourself, but for the people around you and the world in general. And so for a lot of those pieces, I'll have in mind a feeling that I want. And so I do what I call method sculpting, where I will actually sit in different positions and see how I feel. Do I feel confident? Do I feel oppressed? Do I feel sad? Do I feel whatever? And then I'll have a direction that I can send my model in. We're very, very interactive with our models, so it takes us a very long time to find models that we like to work with consistently, because we don't want somebody that, we don't usually work with professional models, honestly, because they know they have to sit in a position for a long time, and so they invariably gravitate to something that's comfortable. And that's not usually what we want. We want something that's dynamic and that feels like the moment between. So there's something about to happen or something that just happened. And so oftentimes, anytime you bring somebody into your studio to model, and this is a whole different presentation, but you must make sure that they leave your studio space feeling better about themselves than what they came in. So no matter what they do, you can give direction and corrections and say, but you always say, okay, that was good. Do you think you could take it a little bit more this way, or could you try doing this? And as another thing, we don't ever touch models unless we ask for permission. So like if the hair's in the way, you just say, hey, could I move the hair a little bit off to the side? Just to be respectful.
And we ask continually, so we don't just ask once. We ask just to make sure that they're comfortable. We're probably a bit more paranoid about that. But we just want to make sure that we're not overstepping any bounds that would make them feel uncomfortable in any way.
Yeah, and it's really hard because as the artist, you are literally looking at that person as reference like a refrigerator. And so you get so excited, you're like, yeah, that's close, okay, so let's do this. And, and you want to just get in there and, reposition everything. And so just, try to keep in mind that they are humans and they are seeing you. So in terms of working with models, one of my current muses is a girl who she was on the concept development team for Cirque du Soleil, and she is a rock climber, and so she's quite lean but muscular, and I like to be able to see the musculature. And she's also, she does plays on Broadway. And so she's very theatrical. And so she has all of these attributes. And what I love about her is that, she's up for anything. She'll come in and I'll be like having hung a rope from the ceiling. And I'm like, okay, so we're going to have you climb around on this. And can you hang upside down? And she'll be like, okay. And she'll just do it. But one of our favorite things to do with her, or, any model that's theatrical, and one of our tests is we have somebody come in. And kids, by the way, are great with this, but that's a different discussion. You always have to be careful with kids and have parents there. But, we say, hey, okay, so can you pretend like you're a fawn and you're in the woods and you're chasing a butterfly? And if the model is kind of like, it's probably going to be hard for us to work with them. But, if they're like, okay, and they're like, and they go like, we know that that's going to be somebody we're going to be able to work with. And Colin is usually sitting in the corner with the camera, and he's just going click, 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 click. And we take lots of pictures, and most of them we throw away. Okay?
Like the vast, we'll take we could easily take 5,000 photos and keep 3. And we've done that where it's literally 5,000 photos. And sometimes those 3 are a starting point for something else. Oftentimes what Kristine was starting to mention is that I'll be in the corner and then we have a group of items that we hand to them and say, okay, this, whatever it is. Okay, we give them a bowl. This is a precious bowl and the source of all knowledge. What do you do with it? And you hand that to them.
Or you throw a scarf in there and you say, this is your worst nightmare. Or give them, whatever object it is and say, this is something precious to you that you never want to part with. And you just see how they interact with it, because it becomes a collaboration between you and your model. And oftentimes they bring things to you and imagery that you wouldn't have come up with on your own, other than you were the creator of the cue. And so we're taking lots and lots of pictures, and we go through all those pictures, and usually we'll find a couple that are a direction we want to pursue. And then we'll bring the model back in and show those, and she'll do another session where she's playing with that kind of an idea. And we tell her I usually tell her what we felt it cued in us, what I saw in this, and what do you feel in that. And if from that second batch we find a imagery that is like, yes, this is it, then we bring them back in, and we have a human-sized turntable, and we put her on the turntable, and we take 26 shots all the way around at eye level so that we can have reference when she's not in the studio, and then we take detail shots. And usually what we'll do then is take the inspiration shot and what she did and compare them, and it's really hard to hit a pose exactly that you did in movement. And so oftentimes we have to go back a couple more times and try getting her into that pose specifically. And at the very least, then I have multiple sets of pictures that I can kind of Frankenstein together to get the exact feeling I want as I'm working on my sculpture. It usually takes me about 6 weeks to rough in a life-size ceramic piece, and I'm not gonna pay for a model to sit there 8 hours a day while I'm doing that. So I will rough it in based on my photo reference, and ideally I would bring them back in when I'm doing all the refinements so I can actually work from life. So we do a combination of photography and life sculpting.
Ask for you to show us an example of how you would create the legs for some of these. Sorry, it's just trying to a jumping off point for
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so do you want me to show you there or here? Or? So you have like a torso?
Do you want to show you up there, or do you want to come through?
So, okay, well, let me see what you have,
Thank you.
and we'll see if this is useful to everybody.
Cool, thank you. So she's starting with that.
Okay, that's
creating
awesome.
them, and then she was like, I don't know how long to make the legs, and how, if it's just something more detailed than just the arms.
Okay, and is the figure gonna be just standing, or is it gonna be doing something? Just standing. Okay. So, I'm gonna recreate her little figure. So she's got a head. And what she did really great, sorry. It's been a long weekend. My voice isn't carrying. So what we have is a roughed-in human. And what she's doing really great is she has the mass of the rib cage, which is one of the major masses of the body. She has a head, and she has a mass of the pelvis, which is another major shape of the body. Hers is better than this little one that I just did, but we'll get the idea. And she's just doing a standing figure. Okay. So we have a lovely human. Okay, with no legs, all right? But we have the mass of the head, the torso, and the pelvis, which are all very important. To put legs on that, I would literally did you in school roll snakes? Did you ever make snakes? Yeah, so you've all seen those little anatomy models, right? The little wooden ones, the mannequins, yeah? And they're just really simplified human forms. So you have ovals and you have cylinders. You generally have tapered cylinders. So if you think about when you're roughing in clay, a human form and that sort of thing, if I was going to make legs, I would roll a snake, but I would make it a long tapering cylinder just to get the rough idea. Okay, I mean, it's literally just a snake. And it doesn't look like much. Oh, and so When you're working on your sculptures, one of the really important things is to set a task for yourself, because with clay, your sculpture is going to go through a really unfortunate, ugly stage for a long time. And you're going to look at it and you're going to be like, this sucks, and I hate it, and I hate sculpting, and I hate clay, and I hate Kristine too. She introduced me to this horrible thing. But yeah, you have to, in your mind, know that as you go further and keep refining layers, so you're going from rough to more detail, more detail, more detail, you're going to find that it actually does come together. So I would just attach the leg onto the pelvis, okay? And this clay is quite soft, but then I would just be narrowing it down into where the foot is, the ankle is going to be, and I would bend the foot. It literally... This is very different sculpting to do these kind of rough sketches than if we were in a sculpting class and we had an armature and we were actually working on figurative anatomy. So for this, we want to get the impression, right? So if you think of as a human, you see an outline or a contour of something and you have an impression, that's an elephant, that's a bear, that's a cat. And what's the cat doing, right? So you're going to attach the thing, right? And you're going to kind of in your mind say, I think the leg's going to be like that long. And I've bent the foot, but I'm like, oh, the foot's kind of big, so I'm going to take some of that off. And if I'm like, well, I think the leg's short, I'm going to squish it a little bit to make it longer. And then I'm going to say, okay, if it looks too short, I have to ask, is it too short or is it too fat, right? Because that will impact it. So if I said, well, I think it's actually too short, I squished it a little longer, and you noticed I was squishing it in the middle where the knee is, because I know the leg's gonna kind of taper in. And if I'm like, oh dear, now the thigh is too skinny, I'm gonna just add clay on top of that, and hopefully I have a little bit of either anatomical knowledge or just observation. And I'm gonna add the clay where the quad group is on the front of the thigh, and it makes that really pretty curve. So I'm not just going to randomly add clay anywhere. I'm going to add clay to the front of the thigh, and I'll add clay to the back of the thigh where the hamstrings are to build that out. And then I'm going to look at it again, okay? And that's the important piece, right? You want to make a decision. It needs legs. Great. I stuck legs on. Now I make a decision. I look at it and I say, leg is too short. Make a decision. I'm going to make it longer, so I'm going to squish it in the middle. Oh, leg is too skinny. Make a decision. I'm going to add clay. Make another decision. Where? Right? You want to be aware the whole time of where you're headed when you're making those kind of refinements. So our initial actions where we were just squishing and playing, those were just follow the clay where it wants to lead. When I'm starting to think specifically, I want it to look like a leg, I want it to look like a hand, I want it to look like a nose, then I have to make specific decisions as I'm going. Okay, does that make sense? It's a long answer for roll a coil and stick it on. You all now have a little sympathy for Colin and why he never asks me questions. Okay, y'all, so what we have to do in the next 9 minutes, we have a question, okay? And if anybody else needs help, we want to run around. And if anybody wants to show their sketch to the class, we can do that too. So the question is, we work in water-based clay. What do you do? So if you love the idea of sculpting and you're really busy with your 2D and or your life, and you don't have a lot of time, I would recommend probably working with oil-based clay because it's never going to dry out. I would put a bag over it to keep dust off of it, but you could work on it. Like Rodin's Doors, The Gates of Hell, he worked on that thing for 20 years. Right? So you can, if you don't want to be stressed. Now, if you just love water-based clay and you want to work with it, you can get involved with the clay studio and they can fire them for you. But water-based clay or air-dry clay, what you do is you can spritz it lightly. Don't have a deluge. Just like spritz it when you're working. If it's a big piece, you want to be like a surgeon. So if I'm working on the hand, I don't need to have the whole thing uncovered. So I'm going to have the whole thing covered with plastic and just have that part uncovered. But every day I have to uncover the whole thing so I can see the parts in relationship. If you're working on a clay sculpture, okay, so you spritz it and then you put plastic over it. So I put plastic on the board that it's resting on, and then I put plastic over top of it, and then I spray the plastic a lot. And then I put more plastic over top of it. And the first piece of plastic is always soft, like those vegetable bags at a grocery store, okay, because they don't dent the surface. And then I put a thicker bag, and then I can put like a contractor bag. And if I have to leave for a week or two or a month, I'll put the first bag over top of it and spray that, and put the second bag over top, and then I'll peel the plastic off the board and wrap that up, and then I put a third piece and duct tape it to the board, so the whole thing is like this sealed chamber, and each layer has sprayed water on the plastic. If you spray a water-based sculpture too much, it will crack and it will collapse. So you don't, and I don't ever, in college I learned to put like wet paper towels and stuff. I don't ever do that because I went away once and I'd put wet paper towels on the head and I came back and the whole thing was collapsed. It's smushed. Yeah, it's okay. The second one was better, you know.
Have you ever had any mold issues?
Okay, do I have mold issues? That seems a personal question. Yes, water-based clay does have mold, and it's actually a good thing. It makes the clay more plastic, so it's a little bit more workable. Yeah, and the gross thing is that, you know, part of that mold is because flakes of skin from your hands and stuff get on the clay and then it turns into mold. And if it really gigs you out, what you can do is put a little bit of vinegar in there and that will kill the mold for you, okay? It also has a smell to it, so. Oil-based clay does not have that problem. Yeah, oil-based clay is not going to mold, and if it does, something is wrong. Yes, I would say that they do, but usually if you're a sculptor, you have ridiculously dry hands. If you don't have ridiculously dry hands, I would be grateful. But some people work wearing plastic gloves. I don't like to do that because I like the tactile sensation. But I don't think the oils from your hand are going to impact it enough that it's going to make any difference in the working properties. Anybody else? Okay, so the question was, she is building like I was building, where I made like a torso and I stuck legs on and arms and a head. And that's certainly a valid way to build, and it's how I think, and I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do it. But her question is, if I wanted to get more into how do I make the clay take me where it wants to go, the answer would be to do what Colin was doing, where he literally took the clay, and I'm not even looking at it, and he squished it, right? Okay, and if I hold it like this, what do you see? It's a cloud in the sky. What is it? Dinosaur. What else? Turtle? Frog. Iguana. Anything else? Okay, what is it now? Flamingo. Camel. What is it? Snail? Loch Ness Monster. What is it? A turd. Yeah. Yeah, so literally, you guys could go sit outside and look at the clouds and play this game. But this is the most fun thing to do with the clay, is literally what I did. And if you can't sit there and not be in control and be looking at it, close your eyes and squish it somehow. Don't try to make it be something. And look at it and say, what is it? Oh, it's a rocky base that looks like the cliff where I got married. Wow, that's so cool. I'm going to put some people on there and make big waves. And sorry, I guess I'm looking at this side. This side is much cooler than your side, right? So I think that's the real beauty of this exercise. Clay sketching is great for developing reference for your 2D. It's great for developing your ability to think in 3D because it will influence all of what you do in your work. But it's also a great opportunity. Play is a professional necessity. You must play because your brain gets a dopamine hit of fun. That was really fun. I loved it. And when we get really serious and we're always trying to make everything perfect, sometimes our brain starts saying, I don't want to do that. It's not any fun because all you do is criticize me and I hate it. Okay, and we need to come back to being kids where we're just like, oh, I'm following a butterfly. And so I think the most beneficial thing you can do at this exercise is squish clay and ask, what do I see? And then do it. Right? Because like when I just randomly squished it, what were there, like 20 different answers about what you saw? And everybody saw something different. And that's the beauty of your art too, is you have your own unique voice and it's important. And we need it. The world needs your voice. So let yourself play and let yourself have fun so that you don't quit.